Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek series. So we have Sisko. Sisko is probably also my favorite captain. He goes from being at the very start of the series a captain who is really confused. He had lost his wife. He has a son. He lost his wife in a Borg attack, and he's now in charge of Deep Space Nine, formerly Terok Nor, a former Cardassian, space station that was kind of on the outskirts of Bajor, the planet, but also in the Bajoran system. And this was recently occupied by Cardassians that had recently oppressed the planet of Bajor. But Sisko, as a character, as a captain, he is a man who is he's hurt. He's gone through things. He's not your typical Star Trek captain where he's like completely composed, completely self-understanding, and completely, I guess you could say, compassionate in all his decisions. He's willing to make some hard calls that would not usually go along with Starfleet. For instance, when he's going against the Maquis, when in their battle against the Cardassians in Cardassian space, they're very much like the Maquis. It's an old French resistance term and group from World War II. But the Maquis in Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, they are trying to supply human settlers, that are either in the outskirts or in Cardassian star systems, with weapons. And it comes, everything comes to a head to a certain degree, to where the Maquis is led by somebody that used to be on his crew that was kind of basically running the Maquis away from his crew. But he goes to one of these Maquis planets, and he basically says, like, I'm going to send down. Sisko says this on his, as a Starfleet officer, says this. I'm going to send down these chemical weapons to make this uninhabitable. It's not going to kill people immediately, but people will have to leave this planet. And the Maquis guy that was on his crew doesn't believe him. He's like, Jobert, you'd never do this. You'd be going against Starfleet code. You'd make a whole bunch of people refugees. But Sisko does it. He sends down these weapons and makes the planet uninhabitable, to where they start having to move people out. And it's not something that you see from a Starfleet captain. It's not something that you see from a Starfleet officer, nor is it a common Starfleet protocol to do something like this. But he wants to form good relations with the Cardassians so a greater war doesn't happen. And he wants to stop the resistance activity of the Maquis to such a degree that he's willing to just take that step. It makes him a more phenomenal captain than you'll see anywhere else in Star Trek, to be honest. Not because, it's maybe the best thing to do, but it's because, so when you see starship captains or Starfleet captains like Picard, he by not necessarily by the book, but by compassion, completely composed with his emotions. He's not willing to take out. He's not willing to basically do anything that's in between, like the most compassionate thing to do. Sisko, on the other hand, has emotions. Not just that, he's willing to do the Starfleet faux pas of the ends justify the means, even if it's not most of the time. But he's willing to do it that one time, which other Starfleet captains in all the different Star Trek series are not willing to do. It's pretty remarkable. Sisko also just shows a lot of emotion throughout the whole series. And he starts out broken, and then you see him evolve as a person, and he still does stuff like that. The instance that I mentioned is towards the end of the series, but it's willing to make characters more diverse. Another character that's very diverse is Quark. So Ferengi in Star Trek kind of started off as like this, kind of like rubbing your hands together. Comical kind of villain. We're like, okay, we know what this villain is. Obviously, rubbing their heads together, like, we're in a TNG, Star Trek, the Next Generation, with Picard. They are like these creatures that kind of like hop around and are very much like what you would consider a play or like an old movie type of villain. They're completely consumed with the idea of profit and they're described even, in the series as like, the dark side of capitalism, the dark capitalist, the worst of capitalism, the worst of capitalists rather. But with Quark, in Deep Space Nine, he's very much like that for most of the series. But he evolves as a person. He starts to see, he has a love interest with one Ferengi female that shows his vulnerable side, shows that he does have that side of himself which is more diverse than just about profit, but he can be vulnerable as a person. He also, comes to realize that, hey, maybe female Ferengi are good at business too, and over time he starts to really kind of like cave into a deeper part of himself that is compassionate. He starts to actually not necessarily care less about profit in the usual sense where he just completely flips, but he actually becomes more reasonable as an individual, as a Ferengi, as a sentient being. Because, he goes through the series always caring about profit, but then when his cousin, Quark kind of undermines and kind of stops in a way, sabotages a deal, an arms deal that could have killed millions of people. He would have made a lot of money, but in allowing these weapons to be sold, he could have killed millions of people. So he decides to undermine that and lose the profit because it's, just not right. And his mother becomes the wife to the Grand Nagus, which is like the economic figurehead, like a pope, but economic pope of the whole Ferenginar Empire. And his mother, originally had a whole lot of ideas about females and how they shouldn't be in business, they shouldn't be outside of the house, they shouldn't wear clothes, because that's a huge subjugation factor and a huge objectifying factor. Not just in Star Trek in general, but I mean, like, it's a way that Ferengi females in Star Trek and Deep Space Nine are objectified, and in other parts of Star Trek as well, though it's more talked about in Deep Space Nine. It's more pointed out, like the objectification, the commoditization of individuals. For instance, female Ferengi. That's what profit can do. It commoditizes everybody, both their personhood, what they can do, their abilities, and even just relations that you wouldn't think of commoditizing, like your mother, commoditizing your mother. But over time, his mother gains greater and greater sway over the Grand Nagus, and Quark becomes more familiar with the idea and is more open to it over time. He becomes less hardline Ferengi at the beginning, and towards the end, he becomes more accepting of how things honestly would just be more profitable, but also work better and also be more compassionate. And before we continue, there's a whole lot of good Ferengi stuff in Deep Space Nine. They started off as really like those cartoonish villains, but there's Rom. Rom is Quark's brother. Starts off as kind of bumbling idiot at the beginning of Deep Space Nine, but it becomes, honestly, he's really like a mechanical genius. And he actually joins Starfleet as a mechanic on Deep Space Nine. At the start, Rom is he's very not only dim-witted, but, he's trying to be a good Ferengi. Basically, a good Ferengi means a good man. So when he's trying to be a good man, basically like somebody trying to be manly, because, in Ferenginar society, you're only a good man, you're only strong if you only pursue profit. So Rom tries that. He tries that for a while in Deep Space Nine. And he's not very good at it, but because of societal standards, he tries to be a good man by trying to achieve profit, trying to work towards profit. But then when he becomes like a mechanic, really a mechanical genius as a part of Starfleet, and really working on the space station and really solving problems that nobody else could, he really comes into himself and finds happiness. And then there's also Rom's son, Nog. Rom's son is Nog, who starts off really like... he's very combative, for instance, with Sisko's son, by Jake, and also combative with other people. He's really trying to pursue profit. He's trying to be a good Ferengi once again, and he has a really like alpha male / very trying to make profit kind of mindset that is common to the Ferengi. He's also very combative when he's talking to people in language and in exchanges that you see in the show. But over time, eventually he decides that he wants to join Starfleet. He wants to be a Starfleet officer. He wants to make that a part of his mission, a part of his life. And when he does that, he slowly starts to see him going away from that toxic personality that he has into somebody who is honestly by the books. Like originally he was just for himself, but then he starts to be like, okay, these are the rules. These are, we're going to follow the good rules. We're going to be once again compassionate, but also we're going to try to help people and try to be, kind of a group, kind of like a conducive unit as a people, not just Ferengi, but with everybody around him. And he starts to become more and more brave, and you start to see Nog be more and more brave, and he gets in the face of people who are maybe has him hostage, like the Jem'Hadar and the Dominion and the Vorta have at some point. They have him hostage on a planet, but he's very brave, and he's like, this is my ID number, blah blah blah. And Garak's there as well, who is probably one of the most interesting characters on Deep Space Nine, and that's saying something because there's a lot of interesting characters. But when he's with Garak and he's captured by the Dominion, he's very sticking to the books, and he's not afraid. You see his bravery evolve, and you see Nog's bravery evolve, and it's wonderful to see. It's good to see him develop as a character. Garak, Cardassian. Cardassians are basically space Nazis. Cardassia at one point was a very artistic society with a lot of culture, but then it became more and more authoritarian. And then, the premise of the show, a little bit before, Sisko became captain of Terok Nor, which became Deep Space Nine, Cardassians were in charge of that and abused and occupied Bajor for, I think, 50 years. And they basically treated them like the Nazis treated the Jews. And you really see a lot of the space Nazi equivalents in a lot of the examples, a lot of stories, and a lot of the episodes. But Garak, while being basically, it's almost like he would be the son of Himmler, or like an SS, basically something like a member of the SS, if we're talking about Nazis, of a son of a high-ranking member, the highest-ranking member of the Obsidian Order. And the Deep Space Nine is called the Obsidian Order, Cardassian, basically secret police kind of SS equivalent. Not more than CIA and more oppressive and controlling, and really kind of like the KGB as well, going after people who they view as a threat to the Cardassian Empire, and interrogating people, torturing them, things like that. He was that at one point, but he found himself in a place where he couldn't oppress Bajoran children in one instance. And this is in hindsight because this is far back. And then basically he was kind of like downcast, shamed by Cardassia, and forced to he can't go into Cardassian space. He can only live on Terok Nor, or as it's known by humans, Deep Space Nine. And you see that his whole life he really tried to, over the episodes, you see that he really tried to be a good Cardassian. And then over time you realize that the only way to be a good Cardassian, to actually help his people, was to not really go along with the system. Not go along with the military, not go along with the Obsidian Order, not go along with his father, who is basically the head of the Obsidian Order, which is like the SS once again. And you see that all the way up until the end, you see that you start to realize that he actually loves his people, and it hurts him to even work against them when they do bad things. But he realizes the only way to save his people and to do the right thing is to work with the Federation and to work against the authoritarians among the Kardashian people who are the ones in charge. There's a lot of character development in this show, and I really love to see it. If you liked this video or this topic, or you'd like to hear more about this, I got a whole bunch more. I can make multiple videos on this. Feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Hit that thumbs up down there. And feel free to share this video if you so desire. But yes, I'd love to do more videos like this. This is just kind of like a teaser or something. I'm giving you a sample of what I could do. I'll provide more video clips and more pictures and more, visual aids in the future if y'all like this kind of sci-fi coverage of Star Trek, or, whether it be gaming, whether it be sci-fi. If you want me to talk more about Deep Space Nine, I will. If you want me to talk about different, different, not only seasons, but different TV shows within the Star Trek universe, feel free to let me know. And yeah, I'd love to hear from y'all. At any rate, thank you very much for watching, and hope all of you have a wonderful day.